There, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. I'm your host, David Tran. I'm also a co-founder of Xfusion.io. Today, I'm joined by Tim. Tim's the CTO of OneCause. He has 25 years of experience leading technology orgs from early-stage startups, scale-ups, and acquisitions. He is best known for his high growth mentality and has a proven track record of building teams, designing architecture, and delivering viable software solutions to customers. He's previously held executive positions at Bolstra, 3D Sim, ZirMed, and Aprimo, and holds 3 patents for data-related algorithms. And he holds a BS in computer science from Rose Hulman. Thanks for joining us on the show, Tim.
Thanks for having me, David. I forgot about those 3 patents.
So I've noticed that you've worked at an executive level across multiple different places. How do you know what roles and companies are a good fit for you personally now that you've gone through the rodeo a few times?
I think I have to start with Aprimo, right? When I joined Aprimo, I was 24 years old. So to ask me if I knew what I wanted to do and what it was going to look like, there's no way, right? And so I grew up at Aprimo, and I'm the type of guy that, in high school, I didn't go for, any club presidents or offices. Like, I just did not seek leadership whatsoever. But when I started with Aprimo, I was employee number 4. I had a good kind of eye for big picture technical ideas and how to like turn that into a machine and get people going in the same direction, and in the end have a product that you can deliver to your customers. And so, within a year of joining Aprimo as system architect, they're saying, well, we need a manager of the team, Tim. You're now manager. No idea what I was doing, right? As I would say, a lot of people get in management would do. And so I really grew up at Aprimo. And by the time I left Aprimo, we were 550 people, maybe 90 million in revenue. My organization had about 70 people, and that was over a 12 and a half year period. So during that time, I got to figure out what it meant to be a leader and try to step into those shoes and do the things that the company needed me to do in order to get this group of engineers and QA and technical writers all moving in the same position towards a unified goal and put out a great product for our customers. So I would say, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, so after that, then I could say, okay, I know what I want. And that helped drive the decisions that I made of joining ZirMed and then ultimately 3D Sim, Bolstra, now OneCause. But before that time at Aprimo, that really shaped my life and my leadership style. I couldn't have told you what I wanted and looked for and things of that nature. So.
One of the things I've noticed is like a lot of peers my age feel like they have to be in that state where they like exactly know what they want. And I think something I've learned from this podcast is like, a lot of people figure it out as they go down the journey. Like, I imagine being employee number 4 is really intimidating at one point where you're like, what am I supposed to do? Like, that's pretty early. That's a lot of like responsibility for a relatively young person at 24.
It was a lot. And, that was in 1998, right? And, you remember your tech history, 1999 was the tech bubble burst. So we were a bunch of young folks that got together thinking we're going to be billionaires because we'll go public in a year with, no revenue, no product, no customers. And that reality set in fairly quickly and fairly early on in that. And it had to turn into execution or you're not going to survive. And that was a really big part of my career to really focus on, let's get the results. Let's get the results matter. And let's not worry about the things that the side things that go on along the way.
Can you walk me through what you learned from that transition of being an IC at Aprimo into being a first-time manager? And how did you know, or what point did you realize like, I like this?
So there's a couple of things about that transition. One, being in the position to, talk to somebody and maybe correct a behavior or, congratulate them on a great victory. Like, that is not my natural state. So I can tell you the first time I sat down to do annual reviews with the 15 people on my team, which is way too many direct reports, especially for a first-time manager, I was a nervous wreck. But I kept holding on to the fact that, if we can get through this, and if we can highlight the things that we do well as a team or they do well as individuals, then the whole team will come up like a float does, in water. And so I just kind of focused on that one little bit and tried to find things that people were good at and try to accentuate those strengths. And a real transition I had to go through was like, my job satisfaction had to transition from what I could do individually and the things that I could individually contribute to looking at the team as a whole and what I helped orchestrate, as the team to do and being okay with that. And that was a very difficult transition for me, and that happened early on in my career.
How'd you learn? Did you have a mentor or manager who taught you how to become a manager? Did you read books? Did you go to courses?
That's a great question, and I don't think you're going to like the answer. So my boss,
it's okay. It is what it is.
My boss, whose name was Rob McLaughlin, I'm going to call him out. He's the one that took a chance on me and said, "Tim, you're now manager." He was not a great mentor. He was a great visionary.
Okay.
He was a great product guy. He could like explain like the customer's needs and how we could go about doing them, but he was not a great mentor for me. His best advice was he put me in that position and he said, "Okay, first thing you need to know is being a manager is salary is not fair. Salary is a configuration of where somebody's at, their experience, all that. But over time, it becomes fair." And in hindsight, he told me that because there was one person on the team that was making more money than I was at the time. So, but he treated, I guess I shouldn't say he wasn't a good mentor, because one thing he did is he treated me as a peer. He treated me as an equal. He didn't treat me as a subordinate. And that's something I've done with my teams. When I look out at the team, I don't look at them as, oh, look, those are all the people that work for me and they're going to do my bidding. No, it's like, those are the folks that are in the trenches with me in everything we do, and work together. We're going to go take that hill. We're going to get this product done. And I look at them as friends and peers, not subordinates or, not people lower down the chain. And I think people appreciate that. People want to be treated with respect in that manner.
So when I see people staying at a company for, call it 10 plus years, I predict one of two things. It's like either they're trying to hit the absolute peak they can out of the company, or they just plan to stay there indefinitely. How do you know at one point you want, what made you want to pursue something different, or how good of an opportunity had to be externally for you to pursue versus just staying indefinitely at Aprimo?
That's a great question as well. So I went through a couple different transitions in my career at Aprimo. About year 8 or 9, I was really getting to the point where I'm kind of bored. I don't feel like I'm growing. I had a great group of managers who took care of 90% of the logistics, and there just wasn't a lot of joy in that. Well, about the same time, we decided we were selling marketing automation software. It was mainly on premise, and we wanted to get into the SaaS game, right? We wanted to have a multi-tenant, much lower price point, not customizable, and we wanted to go get a huge number of customers on that platform, because that was a great model back then. That was probably 2007, 2008. So we were early in that SaaS revolution, but still beyond the pioneers. And so I basically sequestered a third of the team, and I got to go run that. And that was like running a startup within a established company. And that really rejuvenated my career and kept me there another 3-4 years. So what ultimately happened to leave was in 2011, we got acquired by a company called Teradata. And Teradata, we were 525 people, 550 people at the time, I can't remember. And they were about 7,000 people. And they were, I don't know if you know who Teradata is, but they sell these massively multi-scaling database hardware machines. And their theory was, we'll go buy app companies and that will drive data acquisition and will ultimately drive sales to our hardware. Well, they were not a software company. And within a couple months, I could just see that the integration efforts were going to end up with something that I wasn't going to be happy with. And the other thing that happens is, when a company like Aprimo files an S1, is looking for investors, org charts get out, VCs, have information. VCs have other portfolio companies that need technical leaders. And they're like, Aprimo just got acquired. Tim Sublette ran engineering at Aprimo. He might be ready to leave. Go talk to him. So all these other companies started trying to knock on my door and try to recruit me. And I'll tell you a story. I got this phone call from a recruiter. I talked to him, and it was a company out of Louisville, Kentucky named ZirMed. They did medical payment processing. And I turned to my wife, because before Aprimo, I had my own consulting company. And I knew the people at Aprimo, so there was no interview process. It was just come on board. And I turned to my wife and I said, I haven't had an interview or put together a resume for 15 years. I should probably talk to these people. And so I did. I put together a resume, I went and talked to them. And it turned out to be a great opportunity. And the things that I circled that made it a great opportunity is it was reporting directly to the CEO. Right? So at my time at Aprimo, I was always one-off. And I always reported to someone who reported to the CEO. And there's just an exponential drop-off of of compensation, of information, responsibility. And so that was kind of one of my criteria is I need to be part of the executive team that reports to the CEO. They gave me a great equity package, and they were a scale-up company. They were maybe 300 people, 50 million in revenue, and the idea was, I think in 2 or 3 years we could turn this thing into another acquisition, and they gave me a great package, and so that'd be another stepping stone in my career. And so then I ultimately I ended up taking that job, and I was there for I think 3.5 years. I reshuffled pretty much their entire development organization and grew it from 50 people to over 100 people in that short amount of time. So it was a great opportunity for me.
After reaching that, after making the jump from being like one distance away, or I guess 2 distance away from the CEO to being 1 distance away, did it ever cross your mind that like, I want to start my own company and be a CEO someday?
Not a CEO. Just in some of our conversations leading up to this, like I made a pretty definitive statement. Like I know my role. Right? My role is not the idea guy. My role is not the public evangelist guy to go out and talk about all the cool things we could do in the world. My role is execution. Right? I'm going to buy into the idea 100%, and I'm going to mobilize the right people to go make it happen. And every company needs somebody like that. And over the years, I've become very comfortable with that's something I think I'm good at, and that's the role that I've taken in a lot of companies that I've done. 3D Sim was a little different than that because, I was co-founder / first employee, but 3D Sim did scientific simulation of metal 3D printing, and so the idea people, the founders of that, were all PhDs in metallurgy and understood the algorithms behind it. So to me, they were the idea guys. They had this idea that we could predict all these phenomena about that manufacturing process. And again, I came in as the execution guy. We're going to do this in the cloud. We're going to put a UI around it. We're going to take your concepts and we're going to do a C++ solver around that. And I found all the right people to go make that happen. And ultimately we did. We got the product out. It got a lot of attention. And then we ultimately sold that to Ansys in 2017. And Ansys is probably one of the worldwide leaders in software simulation in that space. So again, I was the execution guy. I helped make it happen. So
one of the things I think about is like as a team leader, from like even a first line manager all the way up to like a CEO, like a part of your role is envisioning what can be with the team that you have. So did you not feel like you can, like, I don't know, stretch your managerial strengths to include visionary work if you ever want to pursue that route? Or does it just not interest you from like personal preference?
I mean, that's a great question. I'm getting a little older in my career, and after Bolstra, you mentioned that as one of my stops. We were a startup company. We were not scale up; it was pure startup. We didn't make it. We sold the IP off for pennies on the dollar, and I decided to take some time off and kind of reflect on that. And during that time, there were at least 3 or 4 opportunities I was talking to people about of like taking something from the ground up. And for me, where I am in my career, my age, my desire to retire at a younger age, I decided that that's probably not what I was going to do next, which is ultimately why I ended up at OneCause, because OneCause is a very well-established company. It's been around since 2007. We have a decent amount of revenue stream. We have 5,000 customers. We need to take it to the next level. It's more of a scale-up play, and so I went that route instead because I felt like the timing for me and where my skill sets have lied would not be best aligned to something like a brand new startup. And those are a lot of risk, right? Most startups just don't make it. So how many startups do I want to go through before I finally find one that will work? I've been extremely blessed in my career to have 2 startups that I was with from scratch that ended in acquisition. That's a rare thing, and that's something that I recognize as a huge blessing in my life.
So when you're evaluating opportunities, how much weight do you assign the exact role versus the company and their mission that you're working for? Or do you weight them equally? Do you weight one more than the other?
The first thing I look at is team. Like I look at the executives around, I look at the CEO, and I think, are these people that I want to go be in the trenches with? right? And to me, that is the number one thing. The second thing
Okay.
I look at is, okay, what's the size of the opportunity? Like, is this going to be worth a 3 to 5 year investment? Because it's going to take a lot, right? Nothing's easy.
Yeah.
I don't think we coined this phrase, but a primo, after we're in it 3 or 4 years and we're working extremely hard, we always said, well, if this were easy, everybody would be doing it. So I think I've said that at everywhere I've been for my entire career. And so going into the next thing, it's not going to be easy. So you better be committed. You better love the people you work with. You better look at the size of the opportunity and say, this is going to be worth my time if we can meet the goals we want to do. Past that, I look at like technology and space, right? What technology we're using, and then what's the space we're operating in. Is that a space that I could really feel good in? Like, I wouldn't want to go into like medical device manufacturing because there's tons of regulations around that, and I know my personality is I'm not going to survive something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go work on satellite software. Not as true today, but like back in the day, you had to do 5 years of design work to code 20,000 lines of code that could never ever fail in flight, because if it does, you've lost the whole project, right? That's
Yeah.
not my personality. I'm not going to do that. So so you just got to find it's really still, it kind of comes back to knowing yourself, knowing what your strengths are and knowing what your weaknesses are, and trying to line something up that can match those to the best of your ability.
When you're considering the opportunity of Bolstra, how did you know you wanted to go for a pure startup versus a scale up? Like, what made you realize you wanted to take the risk?
Well, that's a little muddied because all the founders of Bolstra and the lead investor all had a Aprimo heritage. So they
Gotcha.
were
Okay.
they were in dire need of a technical leader. They had outsourced their entire
I see.
development effort, and that outsourcing group had basically given them notice that, hey, by August of this year, we're all gone. So they were kind of desperately searching for someone to come in and lead, and I knew them. Like I said, I knew the lead investor. He was the CEO at Aprimo. I trust him explicitly. And so that's why I joined there. I knew it was a great risk, and it obviously didn't work out, but that's okay. They don't always do, and that freed me up to go find the next opportunity.
So what are some of the things you learned over the course of your career that you wish someone told you when you were younger?
That's a great question. I think one, it's just hard work, right? And you have to be 100% dedicated. I think the people aspect of it, learning that people are the number one thing. I think that I wish I would have known from day one. I think that would have affected hiring decisions. I think that would have affected, people I put in leadership positions. I learned that fairly early on, but I still think that's someone. Some people say that, okay, well, if I'm going to invest in a company, I'm investing in the founders and the leaders, not necessarily the idea. And I think that's something you got to go into with eyes wide open in any opportunity that you pursue.
For all those times that you joined a company as an external, non-founder technical leader, and you're taking a look at the technical stack and you're looking at the product, you're talking with the finance team, the executive team, and somehow either you or someone else in the team feels like something needs to significantly change to become more effective. How difficult are those situations to work with people who you necessarily didn't hire yourself?
It depends on the person. I find that a lot of engineers are resistant to change and don't like being told what to do. And so my leadership style has, like, if we're working on a team and you're going down a direction that I don't agree with, I don't come to someone and say, don't do it that way, and here's why I do it this way. I approach it as more of a question, like, okay, if you do it this way, do you feel like there'll be any weaknesses in what you do? Have you considered doing something like this, which might counter that weakness? And you just keep asking questions till one of two things happen. Either you change your mind or you change my mind. And those happen equally. I tell people, I'm not the kind of guy that just sits on an idea and thinks it's right and pursues it, no matter what, right? My mind changes all the time because I have great people who make a great case. And if I have a preconceived notion that we should be doing something different, then they absolutely have the ability to talk me out of that position.
And what would you say, from, I guess, your experience and opinion, what are some of the underrated benefits of having the experience of working at so many different places versus staying at one place for like 10, 20 years?
I've been exposed to multiple different personalities, different styles, different business models. So I feel like the number of tools in my toolbox are pretty well rounded. Um, I think you can still get that by working at one place for a very long time. I just think if you get exposed to multiple environments, that kind of growth is accelerated. Um, and I don't fault anyone for wanting to work at one place for 20, 30 years. Like when Ansys bought
Mm-hmm.
3D Sim, there was this weird phenomenon of I started meeting all these people. Like Ansys is only like 40, 45 years old. I started meeting all these people. I was like, oh, hey, I'm Bob. I've been here 42 years. I've been, like the head of the department had been there for like 35 years. And right after the acquisition, he stepped aside because he was going to retire. And the person that he put in his place, they hired out of college. And he'd been there 25 years, right? So there's, they just loved what they did. They found an environment they flourished in. So more power to them.
Yeah.
Right? There's lots of people in the world like that. I'm not that way, and I think most developers are not that way. I don't approve of okay, I'm going to jump around every 1 to 2 years. I feel like you need a good 3 to 5 years in a place to really be well established. And I do place a lot of value in loyalty. Um, when I was at Aprimo, I think the average tenure of my team, like at the 10-year mark, the average tenure of my team was like 7 or 8 years. There were several people
Wow.
that I recruited out of college that went on to be directors at the company. And existed at the company well beyond my time there. So, and they
Hmm.
weren't there just because they were settling to be there. They were there because the company treated them well. They loved the work. They loved the people they're working with, and they grew through their career. So,
Did you ever consider going the other extreme of going to like one of the mega like software corps just to see what it's like, just experience that life and do something different?
bureaucracy makes me want to pull my hair out.
Okay.
And like I said, when Teradata bought Aprimo, right? I was the top technical person at Aprimo, right? Every kind of technical direction or decision we had to make at the macro level, I had my hand in. And once you get bought by a 7,000 person company and you're now 8 levels from the CEO, that doesn't happen anymore. And for me, it's not an ego thing. I'm not an egotistic guy. I'm not a control freak, but I do like to control. I do like to shape the destiny of what we do technically. And in large organizations, in my experience, which is very little, usually post acquisition, in my experience, that is diminished greatly.
Hmm. So your exposure to that is in the post acquisition series of all the times you're coming.
Yeah,
Okay, got acquired.
yeah.
I see.
For example, when Ansys bought 3D Sim, I was CTO of 3D Sim, right? I was guiding us technically everywhere we went. And well, when Ansys bought us, they're like, "Hey, this cloud thing's great, but we need a desktop version of it." Like I did desktop stuff about 23 years ago. I really don't want to do that anymore. And um, I ended up going from CTO to something called technical fellow who worked on special projects. Not exactly
Hmm.
what I wanted to do for the next 30 years. So, but again, some
Some
people
people
do.
love that role. Some people at Google can probably stay the role
Absolutely. Like I
indefinitely.
met one of the people here in Park City works for Facebook, and he's kind of in that role, and he loves it. He's like, I got
Hmm.
autonomy. People come to me for help. I'm well respected, and I'm sure he's well compensated too. It's Facebook,
Yeah.
and I think he's probably going to be there for a very long time. But we're all wired differently, and it kind of goes back to like know who you are, right? And don't try. Oh,
So
go
in
ahead. Sorry.
terms of, I was going to ask, in terms of your wiring, what do you feel like? What is your core motivator that like gets you to do all these things and like guides your
So
decisions?
I'm a builder. Like I love to build things. If I'm not building software, I'm in the wood shop building furniture, or we're
Hmm.
buying a fixer-upper house and we're gutting it and we're redoing it. All right. So the whole idea of taking a step back after a job well done and seeing this beautiful creation that you've done, that applies to software just as much as it applies to construction,
Yeah.
furniture, art, whatever. I think people outside of computer science don't understand what kind of art and craft goes into what we do. I talk to the team a lot about this concept of a well-oiled machine. And that's the whole idea of not only, you got all these microservices working together in conjunction, you have a great separation of concerns, right? The roles and responsibilities are clear. But every time you like go try to affect change into the machine, it just feels right. Like we're gonna put a trailer on the back of it and it fits just perfectly, or we're gonna go from 4 wheels to 6 wheels, and the process of that change just feels right. Maybe not easy, but you can see the transformation process kind of unfolding.
Right,
and
right.
because of the way we built it, it's a natural transition to whatever new state has to be.
Having a good foundation that's extendable into like multiple different paths of design is like one of my favorite things in just observing software from an outside perspective.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I've done things from, just corporate management to, being in startups and coding 100% of the time. And my mental process is I usually rewrite it 2 or 3 times till I get to the end, right? Because, I kind of start out with this vision and it just doesn't come together right. And then it kind of hits you as, oh, that's because this is this and this is that, and this, and that's how they go together. And at the end, you kind of step back. It's like, okay, we got this. This is what it needed to be.
So as a builder, I have no doubt you probably derive a very high sense of accomplishment when you like commit a code into the repo. What about as a manager? Like, what does it take for you to have a sense of accomplishment at the end of a given day?
It's it kind of like you mentioned, like the PR and seeing that PR accepted and seeing it built and go into production. That's kind of at that micro view. Right? So now when you're managing a whole group of people and you're managing multiple teams, it's really stepping back and looking at, here's the epics we have. Each of these epics have all these stories, and as you go sprint by sprint, you can just see the number of open stories, go down and down and down, and you can just progress through that. And knowing that, okay, when we get all these stories done and these epics are complete, the product's now going to be in this state, which will enable our customers to do this. And that, to me, feels really good.
So taking a pivot here, this question is going to be a little different from the previous one, but if right now you were to reset to zero, as in no money, no connections, even maybe let's call it even like no education, how'd you restart? Like, what would you do and why?
Like nothing? I'd go back to college.
So okay, let's keep the college. Let's keep your education. How would you kickstart your career from if you were to like do it again? If you were to like warp back into like the body of a 22-year-old who just finished college,
right? You find a well-run shop. You align yourself with very good people, and you follow them. So it's seriously like, as I think we talked earlier. I live in Park City, and the ski slope's like right there. So we do a lot of skiing. And after skiing for, how long has it been? 30 years now. I'm a pretty decent skier, and I've never had a lesson in my life. I learned how to ski by skiing with guys who'd been skiing since they were 3 years old. And I'd just get on the slope and I'd follow them and I'd try to mimic them. No idea whether it was right or wrong. I'm sure I do lots of things wrong, but just mimic people who are really good at what they do, and immerse yourself in that experience. So I would find a software company that I thought was super well run, had great people, people who had a teaching heart, and align myself with them and learn as much as I could and try to get good at what I was doing.
So for the people in our audience who are at the earlier stages of their career, how do you help them? How would you tell them to identify someone with a teaching heart?
As someone who has patience, like when, the first part of my career, I was in, basically in corporate management for 15 years, right? I had teams from anywhere from 30, 40 to 70 to 100. You can imagine I didn't get to code a lot. I tried to pick out, some nice side projects to do and just keep some things fresh. And then now all of a sudden we start 3D Sim, and my first job is to go code. So it took me at least 6 months to remember how to code. I'm sure it wasn't well. And I hired a couple people who had that teaching heart. And I don't know how to spot it, but I can describe what it is. So, we're coding, and I put this PR together, and he calls me over there and says, well, here, let's look at this a little bit. Let's you got this bit of code here. Let's go write a unit test for that. I'd never written unit tests in my life, right? 15 or 25 years ago, it really wasn't a thing. And it's really just taking that time out of their day to walk alongside me and point out areas where we can improve, or spending the time before entering into a task, and making sure that like the design concepts are sound given the tools we're using. And so it manifests itself in time and things that you own, not necessarily they own. And you walk away with the feelings like they wanted me to get better through this exercise. And I walked away from the 3D Sim experience feeling like I don't think I was ever that great a coder coming out of college. I think I was okay. I think I could get by. But I felt like after my experience at 3D Sim, working with these guys and learning from these guys, I walked away from that experience thinking I can now hang, right? I couldn't have said that 20 years previous, but like I can now hang, and that's a good feeling too. That's a fun feeling to hone some skills that, as you're going through those larger management experience, you kind of look at that and say, yeah, I probably walked away from that level of expertise there, and I got an opportunity to go back and dive deeper and get better and emerge out the other end with skills that I don't think I ever had.
And did those experiences mold the way you mentored and coached and managed
Absolutely.
people going forward?
New folks that come on, I would spend time with them, walking through PRs, walking through design, doing some pair programming early on, just till they felt like they could, they could get through and they could progress through problems independently. So that absolutely did shape how I spent time with other people.
And what about the scenarios where you are managing managers? How did you help them become better managers, and what do you look for when you hire managers yourself?
I like to promote managers from within. So I find people who have natural technical leadership ability, and you see that by, okay, you're in front of a whiteboard and you see, okay, this one person, he or she is like they're coming up with really good ideas, and the team is rallying around them a lot. And you see like a team member like, I have a problem. I need to go talk to Laura about this because I know she can help me out, right? And so you start to see little bits of evidence of they're technical leaders, and then you have to spend some time with them about like I just promoted a guy to management about a month ago. He'd been a top contributor for a while, and I spent about 8 sessions with him talking about what it means to be a manager. The first few sessions were very just like black and white of, okay, you now have a fiduciary responsibility to the company, you can now be liable for, so just some things you got to know. And then it went into more stylistic, like this is how you treat people. This is how you orchestrate change. Like I mentioned earlier about, having a question and answer session until somebody changes their mind rather than just coming in like a bull and saying, no, don't do it that way. So mentoring managers has been one of the, I think, most satisfying things in my career. I mentioned the one person I recruited right out of college. He was a director getting his 10-year award at Aprimo. He's since moved on, and I think it was last year, the year before, he got CTO of the Year award from that TechPoint organization. I looked at that, I was like, I took a chance on him, just like Rob took a chance on me, and that just feels really good to see people go from there. So yeah, I enjoy managing managers actually much more than I enjoy managing individual contributors. I just feel like you can have more frank conversations. You can kind of get to the point a little more quickly, and you might spend 10 minutes or 15 minutes trying to help somebody be better in a certain area, and then that just multiplies because they're taking that back to their team, and so there's a multiplication effect of my efforts in there as well.
So when you take someone who's never, like an IC who's never been a manager before, and you promote them for the first time to be a manager, how do you go about the training process of like teaching them to think differently, teaching them to prioritize differently, like changing their objectives to be more amplification based versus
So in the beginning, a lot of my managers are managing smaller teams, so they're a little more of a player coach. And they get into that it's very natural for them because remember I found them because I observed them being a natural technical leader on their teams, and I think that's a big part of the job. The the HR aspects of it, just managing expectations and setting objectives. Those are just things you kind of talk about and work on. I think that's easy to learn. It's much harder to try to move somebody from not being a technical leader to being a technical leader. That I could almost say is a near impossible task. But getting somebody to get down the mechanics of being a manager and surround their natural technical leadership abilities with a little more process, a little more intention, I find that process a whole lot easier than the latter.
And for the scenarios where you hire someone externally, either because you're just forced to due to the needs of the growth of the company, what are you trying to like vet for in those interviews to see that they're
I
a
ask
good
them about
fit?
their management style. Like I ask them like, how do you look at your team? Like when I joined ZirMed, there were two people leading a team of 50, and neither one of them should have been in that position. Right? When things came down, like, okay, we need to figure out how to get more productivity. Well, I'll just tell them to work harder, and I'll just tell them they need to stay later, and those are like huge red flags. Like that's not how you deal with people, right?
Yeah.
I want someone to say like, just kind of like I shared with you, it's like, no, I look at my team as my peers and the people that I'm heading out to take that hill with, and I want to treat them as real people and as peers, and give them the best opportunity to succeed. Like case in point, I've actually had to fire very few people in my career for performance reasons. And inevitably, every time it's happened, I'm sitting around with my leaders and saying, man, how do we miss that? Or what did we do wrong during this process? And we're not able to make them successful or get them to be successful in this organization. Like it never, like the way we look at people and the way we talk to people, it's highly unlikely they're the wrong person for the job. And so we're always trying to look introspectively at like, how could we have made them more successful joining our team?
Have you ever managed someone who's had a different goal than to stay at the company? For example, you might have managed someone who knew for a long time they wanted to pursue entrepreneurship, or if they wanted to join an early stage startup. Would you change your management style at all?
And when it came time, I would have open conversations about where are you at in your process? What are you thinking? Brainstorm some ideas. Do you want to run? And I would encourage them for their goals and dreams. Like I'm not, if someone left, like when I first started at OneCause, I had a couple of people leave, and one guy left because he was a blockchain enthusiast, and he got an opportunity to work in that environment. But we're not doing that. We're not going to do that. We're not a long-term fit. Another guy who I liked tremendously, he told me, he's like, well, my ultimate goal is to do software research and get a PhD. Well, that's not going to happen here. And he found an opportunity. They paid for his PhD and let him do research while he was doing it. It's like, more power to you, man. You found exactly what fit your goals and desires. And I'm not going to hold it against you. And two, I'm not going to try to convince you to stay in a job that's not really aligned with what you want to do in the future. That's a lose-lose proposition.
Right. Do you recall any of the more difficult conversations you had as a manager, and what are some of the things you learned from them?
Difficult conversations. I think anytime you're trying to understand relationally what's going on a team and trying to correct that, and trying to do that in such a way that doesn't put that person in a position where they feel like they aren't good enough to do their job, right? Because if you squash them, then there's kind of no recovery at that point. And so it's really trying to get to the root cause of the current situation in a personal manner, right? So everyone's a person, and then working with them to find, okay, well, what do you think the solution here is? And let's make this happen. And we did have that situation in OneCause where we had a team that was a little bit caustic, and there were some individuals on that team that just were really bringing a negative vibe to the whole thing, and we were on the verge of coaching them out, and they ended up resigning within a couple of weeks of each other. And I had further conversations with that manager, and his conversation back to me was, they just kind of technically shut me out of the whole process. And that's not what I asked my managers to do. Like I want them to be a a technical leadership presence on that team, and we had team members do that. So that was a series of a lot of difficult conversations, and I didn't know where the root of the problem was and what the appropriate action was to remediate the situation.
And so in those types of scenarios, I imagine you just try your best and whatever happens is whatever happens. Does it stress you now that you probably have gone through it a few times across different companies?
Like, I naturally avoid conflict. I want the well-oiled machine to be a well-oiled machine, but we're all humans, so there's always issues to go talk through. But like I said, if you hire good people and you are all on the same page with the mission, that makes that a whole lot easier.
The last question I'd like to ask you is, can you just walk me through a typical day of a CTO in OneCause and what your typical life is like?
Man, every day is kind of different. There's always the boring, product delivery meetings, where we're at. I have a whole kind of massive spreadsheet that tracks our epics and stories out of Jira, obviously a common tool. So I'm always looking at that to see where we're at in the current sprint. So you do a lot of managing the organization. Like, okay, we've identified that here is our company priorities, and it's working with our counterpart. I have a partner in product management named Stephanie Ragazzino. She's Chief Product Officer. So, it's our partnership to come together and say, here's what we think is good for the company, and here's how we're going to fulfill that. So we do a lot of that strategic effort, and then it's a lot of effort to manage that concept into the team and enable them to partner with their partner product managers and get the team in alignment and going forward. That's a big part of what I do. I'd say the second part I do is managing that message back up and trying to explain that to the rest of the executive team of what we think is important, how we're going to accomplish it, where we are in that delivery, and things like that. And then I always have random side projects that I like to pick up about things like where are we at in open source licensing in all our projects? Are we in compliance, or are there some bad actors coming in? So, you got to keep on top of those things, because you don't want to be surprised by those at the wrong time.
Well, Tim, I've been very thankful for your insights this past hour. I just want to give you the floor for anyone who's watching along this episode and they want to follow you or your company's journey along. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Sublette@onecause.com. If I could, I'd love to give a 2-minute spiel on the company and kind of what we do.
Absolutely. You can take a 20-minute spiel if you want.
So I joined OneCause a little over a year ago. I was a consultant with the organization for a few months during the pandemic, and we are a fundraising platform for nonprofits. We have over 5,000 customers, and last year we helped them raise about $550 million, even during a pandemic year. One of the main ways we do that is we have software that helps them put on these large annual events. A gala might have a live auction, a silent auction. So one thing I always tell people is, you're in an interview process and you got to convince this person that this is the place they want to come to work instead of the other 4 places they're interviewing with. And so for me, it always comes down to number one, team. When I joined OneCause, I assumed I'd have to do some culling of the herd to remove bad personalities, or I like to call them divas. I interviewed everyone, and to a T, they were giddy about what they were doing. They were super excited that they were able to touch millions of lives across the U.S. And Canada. And second thing I like to say is technology. We do Angular, Go, we're microservices. We have a super strong CI/CD pipeline. We push to production about 700 times a quarter. And so you get to work with super modern technologies that were created and shepherded by some really, really smart people. And then the last thing, again, is I kind of already mentioned, is the software that we work on matters, right? When things work, we help raise millions of dollars. When things don't, then we have some very angry customers. And just the ability to, like I said, touch millions of people's lives across the U.S. is, I think, a unique opportunity. So we are obviously hiring. We're probably always hiring. And during the interview process, I'm the first conversation people have, right? They put in their application, all of a sudden they're getting pinged by the CTO. And hopefully they figure out I'm a very approachable, likable person. And they're like, okay, if that's what that's like, maybe the rest of the company's that. like that too, and we absolutely are. It's amazing. So now,
Oh, you don't want to take 20 minutes to...
I'm not a 20-minute kind of guy, so I'm amazed we talked 50 minutes. Like it's not my general MO. So. This has been fabulous, though. I love what you do.
Well, sounds good.
I love the stories
Thank
that you
you.
get
Thank
to
you,
tell,
Tim.
and I'm very thankful to have been part of it.